Submarines have always been shrouded in secrecy, their movements mysterious, their capabilities undisclosed, unheard, undiscussed. But for the next 30 minutes, we'll take you where few civilians have ever been, into the deep underbelly of one of India's most potent military submarines. In another few hours, this submarine will set sail with a crew of almost 70 submariners. She will soon dive into the depths of the subcontinent's waters. Cloaked by miles of ocean and hours of isolation, she will silently patrol the waters to engage in subsurface warfare exercises. But before she sets out, this potent strike platform has to be dressed for the kill. She has to be armed for combat. It's a critical operation that hinges high on precision. One wrong move and it could spell doom.
Things that can go wrong is that parameters are not conforming to the ones which are actually there, supposed to be there by the books. Or say for example, if I have one of my torpedoes has an air leak or an oxygen leak, that may lead to a lot of problem in the compartment, wherein you may have a small spark may just lead to an explosion. So we take care of all that.
Officer Chief, switch on system bay to report readiness.
Supervised by the weapons officer, the torpedoes and missiles are guided into their respective tubes in the torpedo room located in the nose of the submarine. In fact, it's not uncommon to see submariners frequently crawl through the length of the tube to bring in the weapon. Each weapon takes around 20 minutes to load, and there are almost 18 torpedo and missile positions for the taking. This can make weapons loading a long drawn-out affair.
You load the weapon, onboard checks are done, and once all that is over, then 1/3 of your job is over, that is, you have accepted the weapons on board. And then starts the onboard procedure where you would, whether you are by the mission required to arm the torpedoes, what state of readiness are you in.
It's not just weapons that make their way into the submarine's belly before she embarks on a mission. As she may not touch land for up to 45 days, it's time to stock up on food and logistical supplies. Almost everything edible finds its way into the submarine's larder, from fresh fruits and vegetables that may last a few days to canned rations and Tetra packs that can survive longer.
Almost tons of ration comes on board, and we stack it up in the rooms which are specialized for it. For example, if it's fresh chicken or mutton, then it is stored at a temperature which is -7 degrees. If we just get rice, then rice is stored in normal room temperature, so there's a different room for it. Tinned provisions are stored separately. Fresh milk is stored separately.
This is space utilization at its best, where every item has its designated place.
Stand by to pass the side! Pipe!
Once the submarine is completely ready for her mission, it's time for a final status check. Time for all department heads to present their department reports to the captain.
Electrical department, ready for sea, sir.
Good on board, check your battery pit.
Yes, sir. Engineering department, ready for sea, sir.
From the engineering officer to the electrical officer to the captain's second in command, the executive officer.
Boat ready for sea, sir.
Good Chinese, front of the station.
Everyone formally assures the boss that the submarine is ready to leave the harbor. The sea has often been a seductive mistress for the seamen because knowing its dangers, they go back to it again and again. The ropes have been cast and it's time for another prolonged deployment. As the ropes are cast off and the submarine's black fin-shaped sail slices through the harbour waters, the action shifts to the bridge, a small open platform on the sail. This is where the captain prefers to command his submarine from when on surface. She is steered out of the harbour by the navigation officer, the pilot of the sub.
Coxswain Bridge.
215 turning to starboard, sir.
Check ship set.
Ship set 230 coming on 240 30 up starboard will out, sir.
Traffic in channel.
Traffic channel is nil, sir.
It's a slow way out and one that's peppered with a host of checks and reports, from traffic in the channel to tide reports and sea depth.
Check depth below keel.
Check depth below keel. 3.5 meters, ready to obey telegraph, sir. Range approximately 5 kilometers. Pilot cable, 1 right, sir.
Fix time 10, good fix. Make submarine on track for course 240. 7 cables to below to next course 270, sir.
Casing ready off, sir. Shut and lock fin door.
Fin door set and lock, sir.
Very good. Captain sir, anchor and casing secure for sea. Indicator buoy check, lock position. All hands in, fin door shut and lock, sir.
Control bridge, all hands in, fin door shut and lock. Sound action station for head count.
Aye, sir. All hands in. Fin door shut and lock. Action station for head count.
Deep down, everyone else is ordered to report to their respective workstations for a final head count, only to make sure no one is left behind. Most of the crew have by now changed into their submarine disposables, a medicated cotton uniform that's worn for 3 days before being discarded. These use and throw outfits are quite a leveler, as no submariner wears his rank on this uniform.
Except sharpshooter.
Very good.
Once out at sea with a predetermined course, it's time to clear up the deck, lock up and slither down into the belly of the submarine. The officer on watch and the lookout are the last ones to climb down. Meanwhile, up above, the hatch is closed. The submarine is now ready to dive deep and disappear.
Report diving stations. Guard room. Major diving stations, correct. Guard room. Guard room.
Captain sir, diving stations correct, sir.
Raise up periscope.
It's routine for every submariner, standard operating procedure, as they say.
Diving now. Diving now.
And yet, every time the Grey Lady goes down, she demands undivided attention from all personnel on board. Because when a submarine dives, it's always a state of high alert. And the control room, or the nerve center of the boat, is in a flurry of activity.
Captain sir, depth 1.5 meters.
Coxswain depth to 9 meters. Speed is off trouble.
This is where the orders originate. In other words, this is the captain's remote control.
Depth 9 meters, sir. Very good.
When a submarine dives, she lets in water into her main ballast tanks. Like most military subs, here too, these are located between the outer and the inner hull. As the submarine gets heavier, the Archimedes principle takes over and the boat submerges.
9 meters, 3 degrees off the wall. Coxswain depth 9 meters, 3 degrees off the wall.
This submarine's first halt is at 9 meters underwater, commonly called the periscope depth. Here, she may be hidden from the surface, but with the help of these retractable steel tubes that are raised, the captain can get a 360-degree view of the world above.
60 meters, 5 degree aft bubble.
Aye sir, dive to 60 meters, 5 degree out bubble.
Ideally, a submarine should neither float nor sink.
Third main motor.
She should be able to maintain neutral buoyancy. But the submarine's weight changes constantly. Fuel and rations get depleted. Weapons get launched. Seawater changes density and temperature.
Check freshwater temperature.
So, neutral buoyancy almost always becomes a complicated continuing calculation.
Depth 60 meters sir.
Aye sir, trim the board, dead slow ahead, depth 60 meters.
While diving, the inspection of every compartment at intervals is crucial because the dangers of the deep sea are many. It's always waiting there for you to make a mistake.
Captain sir, compartment inspected correct, depth 60 meters.
Very good.
When a submarine does a deep dive, it almost feels like you can hear her squeak and moan. The slightest mistake and things can pop. The water can gush in, and God forbid, but if she ever sinks below the maximum depth, the pressure can completely crush a submarine. She can go off like a bomb. Once the submarine settles at a comfortable depth and all inspections are complete, only a handful of men stay back in the control room to monitor the essential controls. It's time to revert to a watch state. In 1870, when Jules Verne wrote his 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, little did he know that he'd inspire a generation of submariners. But it was only during the two world wars that the true value of submarines were recognized by navies of either side. And immediately thereafter, in the Cold War that followed, United States and the Soviet Union used their submarines in oceans across the world to play cat and mouse games. The Cold War today is just a page from history, but submarines aren't. Even today, the world of operational submarines is as classified as before. Deny the enemy the use of the sea. Little wonder then, when Indian submarines set out on patrol and subsurface exercise drills, their missions are a closely guarded secret. Not even the submarine's captain is detailed about his current assignment. The brief lies enclosed in a sealed brown envelope in the captain's vault, and he opens the envelope only when the submarine is at a comfortable distance from harbor. For Commander Deepak Bisht, this is another critical assignment, another dose of battle inoculation where he needs to test the combat readiness of his submarine and her crew. Once he has internalized the mission brief, he plots the submarine's future course in the chart house with his navigation officer. Okay, Captain, so we are in the nerve center of the submarine. I suppose you control the entire submarine sitting on this chair here, and these are all the control panels. How do you control the submarine?
Okay, sir, what gives me control over the boat from this post of mine is the submarine remote indication and control system, using which I can do various evolutions on board this boat in remote control from this post.
Right.
Next to him is the communication panel, which is used basically to two-way communication between various action posts and the control room. As I move forward, that is the steering in the plane stand, which controls the motion of the submarine, which heading I am going and how I change my depth.
Right. And back again here. So basically, this is the area through which on your right hand side as you sit, next, and with the two periscopes next to you, that you actually are completely operational in military terms.
Yeah, and one should not forget my sensors.
Okay.
Because without that, I would actually not be watching the enemy.
With all this equipment around you, the feeling I get inside the sub is that you can be operational within a few minutes. I mean, you can go to war anytime. Is that true?
Yeah, because the underlying motto is there's no peace ever. It is either war or it's preparation for war. Those are the only two phases for any man in uniform.
So you're John Masters' man of war, isn't it? Right. There is an old sort of military saying which says that, if you sweat in peace, you don't bleed in war. But how do you motivate your men to remain in a high state of professional efficiency, committed to the service, in the highest levels of isolation that I can think of?
I think as basically managers of men, and men is a very important human resource, I think there has to be a balance struck. First of all is marrying of organizational goals and his personal and professional goals.
True.
That means there should be no conflict between what the individual wants and what the service wants. And my motto, and of every man on board, this boat, which literally means, the name of the boat literally means jewel of the sea, is train harder than the enemy will fight. Only then you will fight harder than the enemy is trained.
Well, I'm convinced at the end of this conversation that the nation can be rest assured that if there is an eventuality, then people like you will more than deliver. Being a submariner is all about feeling free in a painfully constricting and confined space. It's about adaptability, accountability, and resilience in a world where days and nights merge for weeks on end within a metallic capsule. Life within this seemingly gigantic machine is punctuated by 3-hour watch shifts, maintenance and emergency drills, and a few winks. Not to forget hot bunking with only around 30 bunks for over 70 men. You just have to grab a quick nap before it's time for someone else to take over. There's hardly enough space for 2 men to stand here, and yet this is where 3 meals for almost 70 men are prepared every day. For what is officially a kitchen, this galley is a remarkably innovative and productive zone. For starters, there is no fire, only hot plates to cook the food. And the pots and pans are placed into circular hollow pits just to make sure they don't slip and slide when the submarine rolls and pitches. It's not just the galley that exemplifies space conservation. Multitasking is practiced in every available common space. The wardroom, for instance, is officially the officers' mess. But when the officers are not dining or watching films in here, it turns into a cabin with bunk beds. What's more, if there is a medical emergency, the room then quickly morphs itself into an operation theatre. There are basically 2 types of military submarines. The ballistic missile submarines, or boomers in American slang, that are nuclear powered and carry ballistic and cruise missiles. India doesn't have one of these yet, but what it has are attack submarines that are diesel powered and carry torpedoes and cruise missiles.
Action stations, action stations. Action stations for escape from compartment.
While this weapons platform is a potent threat to the enemy's submarines, ships and other sensitive installations, she herself is vulnerable to internal hazards like fire, smoke and flood. Which is why submariners regularly carry out elaborate emergency drills in various compartments of the sub as part of damage control routines. This particular exercise involves wearing the special escape hydro suit. It's a fire and water resistant outfit with an inflatable built-in hood that can be connected to oxygen canisters strung around the chest.
Ready for escape? Yeah, very good.
Typically, in an emergency, a submariner needs to wear the suit get to the escape hatch, seal the compartment and flood it so that he can float up to the surface. Diesel-electric attack submarines like this one are designed for stealth and speed. Known to be one of the quietest submarines in the world, she generally operates alone on reconnaissance and patrol missions in and around Indian waters. On the surface, submarine navigators use navigational charts like any other ship. But while submerged, the inertial guidance system is used to plot the submarine's course.
Inertial navigation system consists of a system of gyroscopes, accelerometers, and it also gets a feed from the log, which is basically the speed of the ship, and based on these inputs it calculates the position of the ship.
But the submarine tends to drift, and in order to counter this drift and error, the submarine occasionally uses her global positioning system to update her position.
With this advent of a new modern satellite navigation system and global positioning system, it is totally different. Submarines can operate thousands of miles into the sea and still know where they are exactly down to 100 meters accuracy.
Tailor-made for anti-ship and anti-submarine warfare, this submarine's virtually silent electric motors give her a tactical advantage over her nuclear-powered counterparts. What's more, she is cheaper to build and easier to maintain. One thing that strikes me being inside a submarine is that the whole place is wired up. There are just too many switches, and for everything there seem to be multiple connections. And you guys are basically in charge of all the wiring and switches that I see in the submarine, isn't it? Yeah. So how would you broadly define your roles?
This submarine is a diesel-electric submarine. So the diesel part belongs to a mechanical engineer, my friend here, and on the electric part, including the fire control systems, sonars, radars, and any other sensors which we have, because underwater we are blind, so we have sensors through which we make out where we are, our electricity run, and they are under me.
So, and then you also are responsible for all the electrical circuiting which deal with the weapon systems like missiles and torpedoes and everything?
Yes sir, everything will be under electrical options.
And you, my friend, are an engineer, are you?
Yes sir.
In a most simple manner, how would you define your role?
It's a kind of animal which is moving inside water, which is being controlled by people. It has got blood in the kind of hydraulics, it has got brains in the form of sensors, and it has got its own defensive systems like torpedoes. All the systems, all the equipments, all the valves are hydraulically operated. To dive, to surface, it needs air, it needs compressed air. That is also installed on board. I am responsible for many of them.
Tell me one thing, you decided that this was the best choice that you could have made professionally.
Yes sir, because this is submarine appointment is generally only by choice, and you have to be quite insane to choose it in the first place. So we chose it because probably we were insane.
And there is a method in the madness,
yes,
isn't it? Tell me one thing, how do you feel as a submariner that even in a situation when there is not exactly war, but you're preparing for war deep inside the water, that there could be a possibility that that would be the last or you have seen of land? Does it ever cross your mind?
I think sir, before every sailing it does cross our mind, but that is not the reason why we should stop sailing. It will never be a reason that we will stop sailing.
So the sea is a seductress that you will keep going back to?
Definitely sir.
Diesel-electric submarines, as the name suggests, use a diesel engine on the surface to drive the propeller and generate electricity. But while submerged, a battery-driven electric motor takes over. And the batteries are recharged by the diesel engine. But the diesel engine requires oxygen to burn its fuels. And with oxygen being a luxury inside a submarine, the only option then is to snort fresh air from the surface. It was invented by the Dutch before the Second World War and perfected by the Germans and their U-boats. I'm talking about snorkeling, and I'm told we are on our way up to do this. It is to be done essentially by diesel-electric submarines every day when they come up almost to the surface of the sea, take in some fresh air to recharge the batteries and their diesel-electric engines before they go back deep into the sea again. But while snorkeling at periscope depth helps the diesel engines breathe again, it's always an operation fraught with danger. This is because the submarine is forced to stake her vulnerability at such shallow depths. Sense an enemy and the submarine is ready to dive deep at an instant's notice.
If you had an enemy aircraft, probably your own sensors, giving a small indication of presence, even 1% presence of enemy, then the boat would do something called an urgent dive.
I said trim the boat, depth 15 meters.
Wherein the first order goes dive, 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 and everybody and all around the submarine gets up, rushes to his action post, and we dive in a matter of seconds.
Anti-submarine choppers are equipped with dunk sonars that are lowered into the sea to hunt for submarines. The sonar body looks for the submarine's audio signature and if found, prompts the chopper to initiate the launch of its torpedoes. But before the submarine gets caught in the chopper's sonar web, she needs to disappear as fast as she can.
We'll change it to echo motor propulsion.
Approximate speed 10 knots.
Change to echo motor propulsion.
I shall change over to eco motor propulsion.
And revert to ultra-quiet state.
I shall revert to ultra-quiet state. Change over to eco motor. Prepare eco shafting ready for propulsion.
Eco motor shafting ready for propulsion, sir.
She does an urgent dive, transits to an ultra-quiet engine state,
Change over to eco motor, sir.
tames her audio signature and silently lets her sonars lock onto the target.
Action stations for proper attack.
It's a quick turnaround from being the prey to being the hunter.
Data classified report.
Classified steam, sir.
Attack drills pepper most submarine exercises at sea. An unidentified blip on the submarine's radar or sonar map is enough to initiate attack maneuvers within seconds.
Confirm target position parameters.
Somebody out there was turning his propellers, which was probably matching with the enemy propulsion system. That is when the alarm is raised.
I shall confirm target motion parameters.
It's a four-phase combat attack drill. Detect, identify, classify, and if designated as target, attack.
HE Delta on bearing 250, range 120 cables, speed 16 knots, doing course 070, sir.
Electronic subsurface warfare is like playing a blind game of three-dimensional chess, where the submarine's sonars track and trap the enemy before the enemy can trap and neutralize her.
Range 140 cables, speed 16 knots, sir.
My role in an attack is to coordinate the attack. So I coordinate, get the inputs from various operational officers and give them, filter them out and give a consolidated picture to the commanding officer. the ultimate decision of firing or not firing is the commanding officer decision.
And once the target has been acquired, it's time to let loose the deadly torpedo.
Standby tube, salvo 1.
Aye, sir. Standby tube, salvo 1. Tube stood to, sir.
Confirm bubble 0.
Bubble 0, sir.
Standby.
Standby. Fire.
Hear it nudge up quietly to the enemy's rear and then wait for it to get as nasty as possible.
Continue tracking target. Very good. Confirm salvo 2 ready.
XO of the sub, essentially the executive officer, but in all other military organizations, the operational role and the logistical role is normally divided between two separate officers. But in the case of the Navy, and more specifically the submarine, the XO seems to have the strings of everything in his hand. How do you balance the act between both these roles?
From morning 6 to well past midnight, the XO is on his toes. But that is one person, one cardinal point wherein the whole submarine swings around, and that comes quite naturally to us because that's how we are brought up.
What would you miss most if you were away from a submarine and onto another posting, and this would be the last tenure that you would have had on a submarine? What would you miss most about life from here?
To put it very shortly, it is the freedom and independence that I have in a confined space that I will miss the most.
In a world where conflicts are about drawing battle lines and capturing territory, it's ironical that submariners find their freedom in their enclosed spaces. As this submarine begins its journey from the deep ocean to India's shoreline, a question emerges on the future of these denizens of the deep. With many of India's submarines due for decommissioning a few years down the line, and submarines remaining a vital element of India's declaratory second strike nuclear capability, the question now is, which submarine, nuclear powered or otherwise, India would soon acquire?